Good evening and welcome once again to Republican Update, brought to you by the Rockland County Republican Committee. My name is Vincent Reda. I'm the chairman of the Rockland County Republican Committee, and tonight we have two special guests. One who is no stranger to you is our legislator Frank Sparaco, and the other is the newly elected executive director of the Rockland County Independance Party, Mr. John Perrotta. Tonight we're going to discuss several things. Primarily, we're going to try to keep it on the gun issue, which has been on the top of everybody's mind over the last couple of weeks since Governor Cuomo pushed through this bill, and I think he only did it to serve his own purpose to try to beat President Obama to the punch. So I'm going to start off by introducing the executive director of the Independence Party, Mr. John Perrotta. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vince.
It's nice to have you here, John, and why don't we start off right at the top of the show and tell us a little something about yourself, and maybe we can get into the Independence Party.
Sure, absolutely. Born and raised in Rockland native all my life. Graduated from Nyack High School. Stayed here for college as well. Graduated from St. Thomas Aquinas, got my bachelor's there in pre-med biology, chemistry. Stayed local after that and worked over at what's now Pfizer Pharmaceuticals in research and R&D for a few years. And currently right now I'm working for a analytical company. I'm a field engineer and basically dealing with, still dealing with Pfizer and other local science-based municipalities.
Okay, John. Recently the Independence Party, actually in the state and here in Rockland, was controlled by very few people. You've kind of expanded on that. Do you want to tell us a little something about it?
Absolutely. We just organized this year. We're one of 3 counties that are organized in the state. We now have hundreds of elected county committee people. Like you were saying, in the past, it was controlled by a very few. And now we're opening up the doors to anyone that wants to get involved. We want to create a forum where their input is brought to light in our candidate selection.
And is there going to be something specific that you're going to look to candidates? Because I noticed in the past you've supported Republican candidates and also Democrat candidates. Absolutely.
We're going to go with a fiscal conservative approach, also along the lines of a libertarian type essence. That basically give every candidate a fair shot and kind of keep the playing field level for once in the political arena.
Yeah, so that would be a change if we can get that accomplished.
Absolutely.
Right. And Frank, nice to
Yes,
have
Chairman.
you back with us again.
Thanks for having me, sir.
Frank, I noticed that you're right in the forefront, and when there's a good fight going on, we can always count on Legislator Sparaco to be there. Why don't we just start off, because you, along with Elon Schoenberg and a few other legislators, kicked this thing off with the gun issue a couple of weeks back when you had a press conference. I believe John spoke at that conference as I did. Why don't you start off right at the top and tell us about that?
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to explain that. Essentially what happened was the Journal News, the Westchester and Rockland County Journal News, exposed all the pistol permit holders in those 2 counties by creating an interactive map on their website where that pinpointed all the pistol permit holders and their home addresses, which includes a lot of law enforcement officials, a lot of undercover, a lot of abused spouse, a lot of people that have restraining orders that want their addresses kept secret. I immediately thought that it was an extremely unethical and bad idea on the part of the Journal News. So I reached out to some of my Democratic colleagues and I tried to organize and feel them out and organize a press conference basically condemning the Journal News for their inappropriate action. And then also reached out to the party leaders, the executive director, John Perrotta, from the Independence Party, Robert White, who's an executive committeeman from the Working Families Party, Kristen Stavinsky, who's the Democratic chairwoman, yourself, Chairman Reda. And I think in the first time in my history of being involved in politics, we were able to get all major party chairmen, Democrat and Republican and conservative elected officials, to come together to basically back the same issue. And that issue was basically condemning the Journal News and calling on them to take down their intrusive website. And we also had the support of our county clerk, Paul Perrotta, a Democrat from Haverstraw, our Democratic county sheriff. So it was a really good feeling to see us put our political differences aside and come together.
And a number of police chiefs.
And all the police chiefs,
yeah.
Exactly. I forgot about them. All the police chiefs. But it was a really inspiring feeling to see everybody come together and put our political differences aside and work together for the good of our constituents and for the safety of our constituents. And I'm proud to say that the legislature passed that resolution to condemn the Journal News, calling upon them to take down their map, and they did. We were successful. They did.
It took them 27 days to take it down.
But they did remove the map, so I count that as a victory.
And I thought that it was very interesting at the first press conference that we had, when Sheriff Falco were saying that some of his men that work in the jail were being harassed by the prisoners to say, well, we know where you live now, you know.
It was a fundamentally flawed idea. I believe what they tried to do is somehow create this list to make us feel like myself and the other pistol permit holders in the county should somehow wear a scarlet letter, which is obviously something that I vehemently disagree with. And I'm going to fight to defend the rights of the Second Amendment and gun owners in Rockland County and my constituents.
Right. Okay, and John, to get back to you, I guess you kind of felt the same way along those lines. You want to express a little bit about the Second Amendment?
Absolutely, Chairman. Yes, we share the same views as Legislator Sparaco. Believe in the Second Amendment, it extends a little bit further than what the media's kind of overlapped and blanketed us to believe. Second Amendment was basically, from my understanding, to instill to protect us against a tyrannical government, not for duck hunting and target practice only. Even as far as defending our homes, a tyrannical government that's more armed than the citizens that they govern is obviously there's an imbalance in power there. So I think, and we believe that the citizens themselves should be equally armed to that of the government. Otherwise, what's the sense of having that amendment in place? When you start to restrict the citizens' right to defend themselves, you start to basically give way to a rise of a tyrannical government.
We all have the right to defend ourselves, and I mean, that's a pretty common sense approach. I think anybody, you know, reasonable could agree to that, and that's one of the things that makes this country great, is our Bill of Rights and our Constitution. And I've always said that one amendment is as important as the next. Mm-hmm. If you try to restrict my Second Amendment, then you wouldn't like it if we tried to restrict your First Amendment. If we wanted to say that, you know, you can only be Muslim in this country, that freedom of religion no longer existed, that, you know, we wouldn't allow that in this great nation. Or the 19th Amendment, which gives women the right to vote. We would never allow restrictions to something like that. The Second Amendment is as important as every other amendment, and we need to come together. This is not a Republican or Democratic issue. This is an American issue. This is a freedom issue. This is about liberty. And I'm a strong believer in liberty and freedom, and that's why I served my country. And if you allow me, indulge me for a second, in the late 1990s, I served in Bosnia, the former Yugoslavia, and I saw firsthand what a tyrannical government is capable of, Chairman. And I saw that the first thing they do is disarm their citizenry. And then horrible, horrible atrocities then occur. And this is not 1932 Nazi Germany run by Hitler and the fascists, which also first disarmed their public before they started in with their tyrannical ways. But this is the late 1990s in Europe, the former Yugoslavia. Late 1990s Europe. This is very possible. And it's something that I'm not comfortable with. You know, I believe when Yamamoto said that you can never invade America because behind every blade of grass will be an American with a rifle, I'm paraphrasing, that may not be his exact quote, but close enough. I'm proud to live in a country where behind every blade of grass is a freedom-loving American. I'm extremely proud of that.
Well, yes, I recall that after your press conference, there was a rally held in New City I was at the Rockland County Sportsman Association. What was the name of that organization?
Yes.
That helped organize
You got it
that
correct.
with you.
Rockland County Sportsman Association.
And I forgot the gentleman's name that spoke there.
Stan.
He spoke very well that day.
Excellent,
and,
yes.
Who is not a public speaker and who really got up and really poured his heart out to the people. And you were very vocal. And I noticed once again, the Journal News was standing right next to me. The reporter, Steve Lieberman from the Journal News, stood right next to me with his pad. And the only two elected officials that were there to get up to speak was yourself as a Republican legislator and Legislator Doug Jobson. And yet when the Journal News printed the story, they never mentioned your name, like you were never there. And I just don't get it. And why did it take them 27 days to take that down, that map down? My name was on that map too. My address was on that map too. That's very upsetting. And several people that were in the audience, there was a woman that had a pistol permit because her life was threatened by her ex-husband. And it just didn't make any sense. And now you're seeing these houses that are being broken in, and they're going directly for the safes where the guns are and things of that nature. So I think you're on the right track, and I don't think it should die here.
They made a shopping list for criminals.
Yes.
You know, they know exactly which homes are not armed and which homes are. So, I mean, basically in the state of New York, Rockland County residents are not allowed to bring their pistols into New York City, so it's pretty obvious that most of us work in New York City. When we're at work during the day, for a criminal to just kick in our front door and steal our weapons, it was an extremely bad idea. And as far as the gun rally on the courthouse steps, I was honored. Honored to be asked to speak. I was honored to speak. I was honored to be a part of a rally with almost 400 just responsible gun owners that came out in defense of their Second Amendment rights.
On a very, very cold day.
Yeah. And we were basically confronting the ignorant gun law passed by Governor Cuomo and Senator Carlucci, which changes the amount of ammunition you could have in a weapon from 10 rounds to 7, even though 7-round magazines don't exist. They forgot to exempt police officers. I mean, Senator Carlucci doesn't know the difference between a 9mm Beretta and a 20-gauge shotgun. He's completely clueless on this subject, but yet in 24 hours, in the dark of night, at midnight, they passed this legislation. And he became such an expert, which is extremely frustrating to me, because he feels that he became such an expert on an issue to strip me of my freedom and liberty, to strip me of my rights. But then when I spoke to him about it, he's completely clueless. He has no idea that they don't make rounds that only hold 7 rounds. What if you have now automatically overnight you've become a felon, or the confiscation aspect of it? I mean, Chairman, Executive Director, this is the United States of America. We don't confiscate people's property. If you pass some sort of whack job environmental law that says your vehicle has to get 30 miles to the gallon, you don't go around confiscating people's 57 Chevys. You just don't do that in this country.
Well, clearly, I think Senator Carlucci should have at least had a town hall meeting, or at least tried to do some sort of polling to see what his constituents wanted.
And I agree with you.
He failed in doing that.
His job is to represent our point of view in Albany. He's our voice. Just like my voice is the voice of my constituents in the Rockland County Legislature, the same philosophy holds true for him. And he failed. In this particular case, he failed miserably, and he must be held to task.
Right. Okay. Now, do you have any future plans to do any more rallies, either one of you gentlemen?
No, not off the top of my head. I mean, I'd be glad to be a part. There are some rallies being bantered about in Albany that I would like to take part in. But as far as locally, you know, maybe there's some talk, there's some irons in the fire, but I don't have any concrete announcements to make this evening.
Okay, let's move along then. Let's talk a little bit about the budget. Frank, maybe you can give us an update on the budget and tell us about the increase that's come down. And
yeah, this
I know
year's
it's one of your hot button issues that you're anxious to discuss.
This year's budget, was very interesting because it was vetoed. What happened was the county executive, Scott Vanderhoff, proposed a budget with an 18% property tax hike and approximately 70 layoffs, as well as other cuts. And the legislature, in its infinite wisdom, restored all those layoffs. So they kept the 18% property tax hike and restored all the jobs. So it's as fraudulent of a budget as I've ever seen. For the last 5 years, I've never seen once a balanced budget, and the same holds true this year. So to the county executive's credit this year, he actually vetoed the restoration of those positions. And it came back to the legislature, and we have a veto-proof minority. So we can uphold the veto. We have 6 Republicans, and we only need 6 votes to uphold his veto. Unfortunately, only 2 people voted to uphold his veto, and we weren't able to support that this year. And unfortunately for the taxpayers, we were faced with an 18% property tax hike on top of the 30% property tax hike, 31% property tax hike that took place last year. Over the last 5 years, we've basically had an 85% property tax increase. And now you, as executive director of the Independence Party, maybe you could help us out, because I don't think that's the right direction.
I absolutely agree with you.
85% property tax increase is unimaginable, and there's no excuse for something like that to be placed upon our residents and our constituents.
So essentially, there were no cuts made, really.
Minuscule. And we still currently have $100 million plus. You know, I think it's more along the lines of $130 million deficit. We have to sell the hospital. The county executive has put forth a resolution that would help us sell that hospital. The legislature still hasn't acted on that. We're waiting for the Chairwoman Harriet Cornell to bring that to the table.
Do you think that's likely to happen, being that this is an election year for county executive?
Yes. I think that any reasonable person that's not left of Mao Zedong realizes they have to sell that hospital.
So it's your opinion it's going to be brought to the table before Election Day?
I believe so. I believe within the next few months they have to sell that hospital. And I also believe that they're going to be going back to Albany to take out a deficit bond on the $100 million deficit. I think we may have a better chance of getting that deficit bond.
Even with our credit rating, the way it's
our credit rating is
sunk.
1 step above junk bond. Which is, you know, the county's in really bad shape. No matter how you look at it. I always, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I compare the county and the way county government is run to the Twilight Zone. You know, it's a mixture of a little bit of fiction, science fiction, and just dreamland. There's no common sense. It's worse than you can imagine. It's worse than you could have ever imagined. We spend $100,000 on sculptures from artists in Arizona. We are the most dysfunctional county government in the state of New York. And it doesn't make me happy to say that. I'm not running for office. That's not a campaign slogan. That's just a simple fact. We went from a $50 million surplus 6 or 7 years ago to a $130 million deficit today.
Correct.
There is no concept of fiscal conservatism or living within your means in the county legislature, because they can always go back to the taxpayers and just raise taxes. Now the 85% property tax in the last 5 years, we also have the energy tax, which is about $300 a household, the cell phone tax, the hotel tax, the motel tax, the transfer tax. All of these taxes I've fought vehemently from the day they were introduced.
And you voted against them, to your credit.
Unfortunately, they all passed. And you know, I've spoken about them before on this show, and I've rallied and tried to stop these atrocities and this wrong direction that we're heading in. But unfortunately, as long as we keep electing the same people over and over again, there's not going to be a change.
Well, we had discussed this before when I had you on the show several months ago, right before the election. And the people must be satisfied because they sent the same people back to the legislature. It's the same count.
It's very discouraging, Chairman. I agree with you. And I don't exactly understand how you could send people back to the legislature that are voting for 30% property taxes in 1 year. Maybe we are just completely out of touch. I don't know. I mean, you're the independence guy. I can't figure it out. How they continuously send back. I couldn't imagine walking into my local deli or pizzeria if I just voted for a 30% property tax hike. I might get hit in the head with a hammer. My friends and neighbors would kill me. How could you do that to your friends and neighbors, the people? I would never do something like that. I don't like to cut services. I don't like to lay people off. That's not why I got involved in government. But before I raise property taxes 30%, 18%, I'm willing to make those difficult decisions. We have to reevaluate the role of county government. And we have to decide what's important and what's not important, what county government should be doing and what it shouldn't be doing. We have to have these prioritizing conversations. I've always felt that we should not be in the hospital business. I don't know anything about running a hospital, do you?
No.
Have you ever run a hospital?
No.
And he's in the pharmaceutical business.
Yeah.
Why should I be in charge of a hospital? That's why our hospital loses $10 million a year, Chairman.
Well,
We're losing $10 million.
It didn't always lose $10 million a year.
Since I've been a legislator, it has.
When Peter Fellow was there, he had turned that around.
Really?
Yes. When we took it over, we were losing $5 million a year. When the county executive first went in there, Peter Fellow went in there as the commissioner and turned that around and broke even within about a 2 or 3 year period. Then he left, and now we're back to another Democrat in charge of the hospital, and we're behind $10 million a year.
I didn't know that.
You know, that's a fact. It was before you were elected, so you don't have to know that. But interestingly enough, John Perrotta, is your party now going to have a platform to bring forth some of these things when you're interviewing these folks before you make your endorsement?
Absolutely, Chairman. Basically, for incumbent candidates, we're going to take a really closer look at their fiscal spending and what they voted on and what they didn't vote on. Individuals like Legislator Sparaco was saying that are voting for an 18% tax hike and still not cutting any spending are going to be looked at underneath the magnifying glass very, very scrupulously. Like I said, fiscal conservatism is our first priority. Rockland's becoming too expensive. It's becoming very expensive for college graduates and even just individuals who grew up here like myself that want to just keep their grassroots in Rockland, stay with their families. I've heard atrocity stories about individuals having to move to Pennsylvania and other lower taxed areas, almost like an exodus out of Rockland. Families being broken apart because of basically what seems to me to be economic slavery in a sense. We're basically at the puppet strings of the government right now, and it's very discouraging. Like I said, I like to stay in Rockland. I try to take a grassroots approach, try to stay local as much as I could throughout my whole career. But you know, the essence of it is, if the spending increases and the taxes increase, I mean, all of us are going to have to come to that point where we're going to have to decide a better way of life and or sit in this basically, like I said, economic slavery and indentured servant, where we're just basically turning our hard-earned dollar over to government so other government employees can flourish.
Well, you're going to have an opportunity this year to show that you are truly an independent party for the Independence Party. Glad to have you aboard with us on a lot of these issues.
Pleasure to be aboard.
I'm sure you're going to take a good look at my Republican candidates.
Absolutely.
So, well, what are your plans for the future, Frank, as far as this a gun issue? Are you going to carry it any further? They're talking about how could they leave out all the police officers with their clips and their guns? I mean, did they not think about this? Did not one person come forward in the Assembly or the Senate to say, hey, what about our state troopers and about our policemen in the city and all of it?
This was very shady. The way this was done, that's the only way I could describe it, Mr. Chairman, is that in the middle of the night, they forced this down the Senate and the Assembly's throat before they even had time to read it, which is unfortunately starting to become common practice as to how bills are passed. In the dark of night, before anybody has a chance to realize what's really going on and what's in the bills. Excuse me, unfortunately, this bill passed, and now there's dozens of amendments being proposed to the bill to fix all the mistakes that are in it.
Right.
The New York State Rifle and Pistol Association has also filed cause to bring the state to court to basically determine whether or not this law is even legal, whether or not it went through the appropriate channels before it was passed. So of course I'm extremely supportive of that. I've just recently became a member, because of this situation, became a member of the National Rifle Association and the New York State Rifle Pistol Association in an effort to help them fight this this attempt to seize my property and strip me of my rights. So this has, I believe, had the opposite effect. I believe that it's inspired people such as myself to join these organizations. I know that pistol permit applications have tripled.
They have.
Tripled in Rockland County alone.
That's another thing I wanted to bring out. The governor wants to renew the licenses every 5 years. To me, that's another tax, okay, by doing that.
Yes.
We used to pay $150, and that was it, and you kept your license. Now, every 5 years, we're going to have to come up, and they're going to raise that. You know, that from $150, maybe it's going to go to $200. That's another way of taxing.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think that I don't remember the last time that we actually had to pay for a tax for a constitutional right. It's kind of sad because I think in that sense, you're almost making the right of owning a gun only exclusive to those who have the means to fiscally support their right. And that's not what this country was built on. We don't pay a tax to vote. So why should we pay a tax or licensing fee for the Second Amendment? Why should the media, do they pay a tax for shooting out the newspapers? And
you don't pay to vote.
You don't, exactly.
You don't have to pay to vote. I don't know what the price is now. Do you?
Yeah, it's funny because recently, because of everything that happened with the Rockland Journal News, I got inspired myself and I went through the process, and I'm currently in the process, I should say, of ascertaining my pistol permit.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Glad to have you on board.
Glad to be on board, in good company as well. $150 at the county clerk's office as of now.
Yes, that's what the fee is.
Absolutely, and that used to be and still is up to this point a one-time fee. Whether that's going to change, as you guys are saying,
it's definitely going to change.
Oh, it's going to.
I mean, it's just another way.
Originally, it started out as $25.
They're going to bring us through this every 5 years, and it's disgraceful.
Yeah.
I don't agree with being charged, period. It's a constitutional right. You should not be allowed to charge people to enact their constitutional rights. And that's not a radical concept. I mean, it's just, it costs millions and millions of dollars to run the Board of Elections and to have free and fair elections. And in no way am I saying that we should charge people to vote. No. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying that one right is as important as the next.
Yeah, I understand where you go.
Government can pay for women, my tax dollars go for women to have abortions, but yet for free. But I have to pay to enact my Second Amendment right and to have a gun permit?
Exactly.
It's absurd. We have our priorities totally twisted in this state right now.
No. Well, gentlemen, believe it or not, our half hour is up. I want to thank you very much for being here. And John Perrotta, the new executive director of the Independence Party, I wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for joining us. I'd like to have you back again.
Absolutely.
And Frank, it's always interesting having you here, and we never have to worry about you holding back what you feel. And you do represent your district very well.
Thank you, Chairman.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Rockland County Republican Committee, thank you for tuning in tonight. We're here each and every Tuesday night. If there's any questions or anybody that you'd like to see back on the program, please don't hesitate to write. You could send us an email or you could write directly to our offices. And there is someone in our office every Saturday morning between the hours of 9 and 12. If you have any questions or any way that you feel that our party can be of assistance to you. Thank you once again. On behalf of the Rockland County Republican Committee, have a great evening. Good job.